Hello everyone! Before we get started with this one, I do want to note I will be reading from the paper for this video and the next. Yesterday I'd recorded them both using the teleprompter, and there was a problem with the speed and size of the text. That's not really great for long speeches, because I end up just being really robotic. So hopefully I can emote a bit more. It won't be nearly as boring, because I couldn't even get through watching myself talk after watching the videos back. So that's what's going on. Bear with it. Yes. Okay. Outcast Silver Raiders shamed me. Last year, I roll into Gen Con with all my new releases. The biggest schedule of releases I'd ever done. And as I've discussed previously, the reaction to them was kinda meh. Very unfairly so in my estimation. I mean, there are some all-time bangers in that bunch, as the kids would have used to say. But of course I would think that, right? I'd better think that. I put them out. And at Gen Con, I saw that a bunch of people were carrying this box. I had no idea what it was. I'd never heard of it. I mean, I'm not much plugged into the community anymore. So why would I know what new thing is out there? But it's a big box, and the initials were OSR, so of course I figured that's going to be relevant. So I go to their booth, and it's awesome shit. Outcast Silver Raiders is awesome shit. You know, it's OSR done mean and nasty, just the way I like it. And Lamentations of the Flame Princess is named as an influence inside the set, which was nice of them to do, because I know goddamn well we are creatively influential to a whole bunch of people that treat us like shit, so. Anyway, after I get this box set, I put all the brakes on for the upcoming releases. The stuff we're getting ready to put to press soon, actually I just sent most of the files to the printer today. I was originally going to do last October, November. But this box was so impressive, I was thinking, oh, no, we are getting left behind. This has to change. Keeping up with the community maybe has some advantages. So everything we're about to do, everything that is going to blow you the fuck away, old school LOTFP style, well, it's all because of Outcast Silver Raiders. And their heart, it is in the right place. From their website, quote, Outcast Silver Raiders is what the televangelists, the hack investigative journalists, and the grasping Hollywood producers imagined when they caused a satanic panic around RPGs in the 80s. Demons, darkness, sacrifice, blood spilling over cracked altars in desecrated chapels. Players portray brutal warriors, clever rogues, and conniving sorcerers who reject the barbaric theocracy of medieval society to seek fortune and glory as outcasts beyond the reach of lords or God. Unquote. Taking up the fight, from my youth in the 80s, kicking at these restrictions on imagination, from the televangelist, hack investigative journalist, etc. That was foundational to the founding of LOTFP. It is no coincidence that the first things I published from other authors were Carcosa. I've talked about that on this channel. It was one of the earliest sharp divisions in the OSR. And also from, stuff from the guy that does porn, who was always a divisive figure, even back in the early days. Lots of hand-wringing in the community about both. And signing them up, both announced the same week in fall 2010, was a statement of intent and principle. However imperfect, I've been in upholding that principle over the years. So, what's going on with Outcast Silver Raiders These days, from their Discord, March 21. Quote, at the advice of Exalted Funeral, I had a sensitivity reader come in to take a look at the books before the upcoming second printing. Most of their feedback was around minor language changes to make clear there is no exclusionary intent in some situations where it could have been unclear. One large change that was amiss from me was using the phrase spirit animal in the referee's compendium and throughout the mythic North. I had a blind spot here and didn't take the time to consider the origins of that phrase, or how it is a clear and insensitive co-opting of meaningful terminology for indigenous cultures and religions. There's a big difference between the considered satirical inclusion of an institution like the Catholic Church, which has been part of the power structure of the world for millennia, and the casual misappropriation of a chronically marginalized and exploited culture. I can't do anything about the first printing at this point but apologize, but I'd like to do so now. I'm sorry I misdone this and regret putting something racist out there in the world. For the second printing and associated updated PDFs, this error, among others, has been corrected. These edits do nothing to change the content, texture, or horrific spirit of outcast Silver Raiders. They simply make a bit more effort towards ensuring everyone can enjoy the occult medieval madness without feeling excluded or marginalized. Unquote. And upon reading that, I felt very sad. I still feel very sad. And I feel like I'm losing my mind. I mean, I'm often told by other people that I have very little empathy. I've heard it so often that I've internalized it to be true. But I do try to put myself into other people's shoes. How would I feel if I were in their situation? And the fact that my thinking is so unusual, as I'm always told, makes this a bad thing. My ex-wife told me I shouldn't ever follow the golden rule. You know, treat others as I would wish to be treated. I'm apparently so fucking weird that treating others as I want to be treated so often leaves other people feeling bad and awkward and insulted. I gotta tell you, that's a wonderful way to go through life, always having to put on a front just to have human interaction. Every interaction I have with my fellow humans, I feel like I'm in that scene from The Terminator, you know, where I have to figure out what the appropriate thing to say in that social situation is. The menu of possibilities just pop up in my mind's eye, and I have to pick the one that I think is the most appropriate for the situation. And just trust that any of the things my brain is inventing on the spot would be appropriate in the first place. And it's all just guesswork. It's all me pretending, just trying to get through life without getting the shit kicked out of me, literally or metaphorically, even when everything inside is telling me to just say, fuck you, asshole. It's pretty terrible. Always feeling like I'm having to fake whenever I'm around another person, but also not being able to stand being alone and stuck with my own thoughts. And that's the wonderful thing about imagination and fiction. I can take down the front. I can remove the filter. I can just be in one part of my life. I don't have to feel like I'm a prisoner, which is how I feel much of the time, my whole life. So I put myself in the shoes of the Silver Raiders guy, and I think, what would it take for me to release that kind of statement? And the sense of abuse and torment and just being completely broken as a human being came over me so strongly, I had to leave the computer and lay down. I felt nauseous and dizzy, and my entire body started hurting. Even a little later, typing up the script, I felt so weak and sad and powerless, like life's not worth living if this is how one is forced to treat one's own imaginative work. I let this script sit for a week, to make sure I wasn't just completely overreacting. And while I'm certainly calmer now, I still stand by everything I'd written here. That's what happens when I put myself in another person's position. But of course, there is no reason to think that this statement involved any form of coercion. People think like this. People are happy to think like this. And there's no reason to think that this statement wasn't enthusiastically written as a positive statement about making their game better. And that makes me feel just as bad, because it highlights just how far away my thinking is from the norm today, how other I am from so many people, even in my industry, even from people who have a lot of the same tastes and creative urges I do, people that make things I very much admire. Though I do wonder what would have happened if he'd said, "Nah," to Exalted Funeral's advice. See, I know that I have a view of the world that is obviously not in vogue right now, but how I think has always been unpopular. But there are certain things I believe to be true right down deep in the very core of my being. Things I can't ever bend on. And sometimes it is so far outside the norm, whether it's the norm of the world or just people, the communities I interact with. I couldn't tell you, but it makes me feel I have no place. And all of this was much easier to swallow back when I wasn't trying to do anything or have a place in the world. But every day now that I'm trying to do something, I feel it. It's crushing. So here's one of my core beliefs, and I'm sure I've said this before. The new boss and the old boss are functionally identical. Is this inclusive? Is no different in function or mentality or purpose than, does this praise Jesus? I mean, being willing to shit on the cultural hegemony from 40 years ago, the 80s were 40 years ago, doesn't actually mean anything. It's literally nothing. Taking a piss on the cultural zeitgeist of the 1980s in 2024, I mean, that's not really any different than taking a piss on cultural attitudes of the 1940s and the 1980s. Of course people are going to do that. That's what you do. But, it must be fine to also shit on, or just simply ignore, the cultural hegemony of today, especially in creative work. Being able to do that is the absolute bare minimum qualification for living in a free society. Being willing to do that is the absolute bare minimum qualification for being an individual. Of course, identifying exactly what is the cultural hegemony today isn't quite so straightforward. If you're, say, a trans person living in Gopher Fuck, Texas, you're probably going to have a much different experience than a trans person in Seattle. Likewise, if you're a Christian conservative in Seattle, you're probably going to have a much different experience than a Christian conservative living in Gopher Fuck, Texas. But no matter what's outside your door, you'll look online at how people like you are treated somewhere else, and you're going to feel on some level like it's you under attack. And the thing attacking you, that's the power you're going to fight. It's understandable. It's what I'm doing on a certain level right now in this video. I mean, the Silver Raiders people didn't do anything to me. They're not attacking me, but I'll get more into this later. But I think all of this is good and proper. If you're a trans person, you have every right to advocate for the way you want the world to be and to criticize the people standing in the way. Likewise, if you're a Christian conservative, you have every right to advocate for the way you want the world to be and to criticize the people standing in the way of that. This is the right of every individual in a free society. And you're free to agree or disagree with any of them about any or all of their beliefs, a la carte. But the one thing or two things that you can't do is tell them they can't advocate and they can't disagree. Now, this is all a bit of a digression from the main point. You know, why I have such a problem with Silver Raider's statement specifically. It is kind of a double standard. Oh, these beliefs are subject to parody and ridicule and criticism, but not these other ones, which, okay, people are going to favor some beliefs over others and be more willing to play with some beliefs and less willing to play with other beliefs. But this call is coming from outside the house, so to speak. Someone thought, oh, this is a cool idea to play with. And they did. They put it in here. And then they're told it's not cool, and they've decided to go along with that, to apologize, to be more inclusive. Which is... okay. Here is where I'm going to show you just how far off the reservation I am. And I did use that phrase very deliberately because it's the perfect metaphor for deciding that no, I'm not just going to be confined to the place that you say I should be satisfied with. Beliefs are not people, and there is no such thing as a sacred belief. People will say there is. People will act like their belief and their self are indivisible. I get it. I mean, I just said there are things I believe to be true right down deep to the very core of my being. But this is obviously bullshit. Obviously. All these things, oh, this belief is my identity. Well, identity is just a story you tell yourself about yourself. And you're biased. And beliefs are just ideas that someone really likes. But an idea is all it is. It's perfectly fine. It must be perfectly fine to play with, dissect, Frankenstein back together, criticize, kick, or otherwise mistreat a belief. That's what imagination is for. That's what art does, if I dare use the word art in anything connected to role-playing games. And if you don't like how someone has played with, dissected Frankenstein back together, criticized, kicked, or otherwise mistreated your pet belief, that's fine. It's fine not to like that. And people should leave you to practice your beliefs without interference, to a degree. But that's as far as it should go. And people having opinions about your beliefs, having their own interpretations of your beliefs, that's not interference with your beliefs. Not to mention to be able to stand up and say, I don't believe that, again, is the right of every human being. Like, right here, right now, I'm not doing this video saying that the Outcast Silver Raiders people, and I'm avoiding using names because I've got no idea how to pronounce the author's last name, and it would be inappropriately familiar to just use his first name in the context of this video. You know, I'm not saying what they should or should not do with their game. I'm simply using their decision as a springboard to communicate how I feel about such things. Because there's so many people that are making these statements. Oh, we did this, sensitivity, blah, blah, and it's like, okay, that's a thing we want to signal. Well, counter-programming. It's what you do. You know, that it's not a thing that everybody should do. Everybody should be doing their own fucking things. Sorry, off script. So let me just come out and say it. The very ideas of spirit animals, whether spirit animals or whatever belief where people feel some sort of, any sort of supernatural connection with animals, it's fucking stupid. Same way, you know, God doesn't exist, so Jesus wasn't his son. Muhammad was not his prophet. Jesus didn't rise from the dead after being crucified. I should have recorded this on Easter. And Muhammad didn't receive jack or shit from Gabriel because angels aren't real. Your ancestors aren't paying any attention to you because they're fucking dead. And spirits aren't real either, not in original native conceptions of them, nor Western adaptations or European indigenous, versions of those concepts. And I'm just using things that I know some things about. There are several large religions. I don't even know enough to say I don't believe in them. So to see someone pretend that a belief that using spirit animals is something, not even saying this is what real people believe, but using an idea to create a whole fictional version of it, to say they can't do that because it's racist? I mean, that makes me want to grind my teeth down to powder. That's not racism. Adapting ideas is not racism. I mean, just for an example, if I fuck around with the idea the Aztecs had about needing to practice human sacrifice to the tune of hundreds of thousands of lives lost to the practice, maybe millions depending on which estimates you believe, is that racist? Fuck off. Beliefs are not people. You can't be racist to a belief. And this is probably irrelevant, but my own heritage is largely Polish and Italian. So that's likely a lot of raped altar boys amongst my ancestors. And that statement right there says everything I need to say, I think, about how I see heritage and ancestry and religion. Anyone's heritage and ancestry and religion. I'm not just pointing at certain people and saying, oh, your beliefs suck. No. All this stuff. In every culture, it's nonsense. Or maybe atheism is fucking stupid. I mean, maybe I'm going to die and be in for a very big surprise. So when people dunk on atheism, it's just like, well, still don't believe in a God. So we'll eventually see who's right. Why are we arguing about it now? Anyway, so I guess this has all been throat clearing. I don't think what this is about is actually what this is about. I don't for a second think that the respect for belief in spirit animals is at the bottom of any of this. Because there are two concepts in the present cultural environment that make no sense to me. Actually, there are hundreds, but we'll just talk about a couple here. And this is where I'm going to lose a good many of you. And goodbye in advance, because I will not pretend. To me, and increasingly it feels like only to me, the great benefit and the point of cross-cultural contact is the adoption, remixing, synthesizing, and generally playing with the cultural mores and artifacts of each other's cultures. I know that the phrase cultural appropriation has a technical academic definition, but as it's popularly used, I am completely confused because what is called cultural appropriation in general conversation and online discourse, to me, is the entire fucking point of cross-cultural contact. The idea that certain people would have perpetual cultural copyright over anything, and this ownership of this cultural copyright is held ethnically, this just seems absurd to me. It's just the height of nonsense. And then, well, for the last point, I'll start with this statement. I think parodying the Catholic Church in your work and denigrating evangelicalism in your mission statement is going to alienate far more people than using spirit animals in a work. You cannot seriously or truthfully knock Christianity, the dominant religion on 4 continents, and say you're concerned about excluding people or making them feel marginalized. Hell, every decision made from I'm going to make a role-playing game, it's going to be fantasy, it's going to use OSR rules. You know, those broad things all the way down to the tiniest details. Every decision excludes someone for some reason or another. And I can't imagine paying someone to tell me that something like this is bad, like really bad. Not because of its impact on the project and the work itself, but because of external concerns? I don't get it. So I don't think that's it. Now, I think the whole thing was laid out with the words power structure and marginalized. It's a whole way of looking at the world that's everywhere. Everywhere. And I think it is largely incoherent nonsense. At best. See, if you're looking at things zoomed out, looking at, demographics on a national level, okay, there might be some information there. See how things, if you want to see how things are different regionally from a national average, okay, I can see utility in that. Taking any of that and applying it to individuals, assuming it applies to any particular individual because of their demographic category, that's prejudice. That is literally, and exactly prejudice. And it's bad. It's bad. I want to say it's always bad. Always. So, there is not some universal concept of right or wrong, and this works whether we're talking either morally or factually, where marginalized is packed into the thing that you're saying is right. And then everything privileged is out here in the wrong ether. That's not how that works. And I understand that's something of a straw man. It's very simplified, but what is not a straw man is the idea that if someone privileged does something good, of course they did. They had privilege. No big deal. And if someone marginalized does something bad, well, hey, cut them some slack. It's like, no. It's right and wrong, both morally and factually, have not a goddamn thing to do with someone's social position. And it does a disservice to everyone. Everyone to pretend that it does. As I said in a previous video, just a thing that came off the top of my head, and I've been repeating it, the infrastructure should be neutral. So when it comes to, Silver Raiders' spirit animals, is it an appropriation of an idea? Yes. So what? So what? Seriously. It's an appropriation and an adaptation of something that isn't real to begin with. If I say, oh, the tiger is my spirit animal, what effect does that have on someone that actually believes in that sort of thing anyway? It's none. Or at least no more than a Christian who might be offended that I turned St. Augustine into a slime monster in one of my dungeons. It's the same shit. Everyone's fine with heresy until it's their shit someone's kicking. As the great Steve Hughes said, so what if you're offended? Nothing happens. Same as me being offended when someone does something and proclaims beliefs I don't have. I had a ridiculously emotional reaction to the thing, So what? That is my problem. No one else has to bend on that. Again, if the Silver Raiders people really think it's a good idea to have a sensitivity reader, then that is what they should do. I don't want someone to watch this video and think, oh yeah, no. The point is, though, the point of all this, if that's what you want to do, fine, but that if that's not what you want to do, that's fine too. Should have just said that, over and done with. Anyway, this whole thing is, on one level, ridiculous. This situation has nothing to do with me. So why do I care? Why am I worked up about it? Well, because I've gotten this pressure intensely in the past. I'm sure there will be more in the future. I'm sure this video, if anyone bothers to watch it, is going to bring a certain kind of hell on me all by itself. But the pressure that this whole thing is not only a popular way to think, and I'm not in with the popular way to think, but the idea that it's the only way to think and still be considered a decent person? I don't believe that. Not for a second. But I have to deal with that pressure, both implied and explicit. I can't deal with it. Obviously, I can't deal with it. Not very well. I mean, where how you treat actual people doesn't much matter, and I have enough trouble with that, you know? But what your perspective is on some ephemeral philosophical concept, that determines what place you're allowed to have in the world. I mean, I know people cannot be as wild and free as they like. We live on an interconnected planet of 8.1 billion people, according to the first site that came up on a Google search. I mean, there needs to be some order. But I do not believe that retaining order in this world requires imagination and fiction to be so scrutinized, judged, surveilled, and at times punished. I do not believe doing so achieves anything good. Not one single good thing. And I don't think the people who do that are being or achieving anything good. Not one single thing. It makes it difficult for me to enjoy things, not knowing whether something is a genuine expression or if someone's concerned with outside judgment. Would it have been better in its original conception? Was something better actually taken from us by these attitudes? It makes it hard to create things. I'm always second guessing whether something is okay or not, while desperately trying not to care because I'm trying to create, or curate if someone else is the author, something genuine. And I'm worried about putting something in specifically to kick back at this pressure, which is still a corruption of the original intent. I'm always worried that my suggestions on someone's manuscript is corrupting what they're intending to do. I'm always wondering if they know it's okay to argue back. And it also affects... I try not to be so active on social media. I mean, I've got a personal Facebook account, and I've got LOTFP accounts on a couple of services, and I hate it. I hate it. There's always someone that's going to post something bad. Sometimes I think it's bad, and I feel the need to take action, delete it, whatever, because I don't want that shit in my spaces. Sometimes it's something that I think it's fine, but other people are complaining about it to me. Or if I see it first, you know, I'm thinking, oh, I got to get rid of that. I don't care, but other people, I don't want to hear this shit. And I got to deep six the thing. And I hate it. I don't want to be in a position where I have to tell people what they're allowed to say. I don't want to be in a position where I have authority to tell people what thoughts aren't allowed to be expressed somewhere. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. And I can't imagine that someone who likes and approves of sanitizing every forum and platform can be a good person. It's so inimical. Inimical. Why did I write that? It's so inimical to my entire worldview of what a good and open person and a good and open society is. So I'm thinking these days I have a minority opinion on all this. And yeah, I have to deal with everything that comes with having a minority opinion. But the everything in that sentence should not be a constant fear and being under constant threat of being removed off the board entirely. I don't accept that as proper or correct. And I can't even I can't even trust anyone who stands by me at any particular point in time. Am I one unpopular opinion away from this person throwing me away and getting social clout for doing so? Been there. Or are they the kind of person who's against the current way of doing things, that's not fighting for people to be freer, but hoping to get in a position where they can impose their will on other people? Just like all these people who in the 80s were against the moral majority, but they just wanted to install their own proper way of doing things now? So I guess I'll end here. There's a lot I wrote and cut out because, really, who's going to change their mind? Because I have examples and receipts from the real world, quotes from various books I've read that I'm pulling from or apart. You're either agreeing with me, disagreeing with me, or wanting me to shut up and get the books out, monkey boy. So, in the end, this whole thing I'm doing here, it's more like a cry in the wilderness. Is anyone out there? Am I all alone on the eve of releasing the biggest project we've ever done? And I'm so tired. And I mean, even after sitting on this for a week, I'm still having to resist the urge to go on lengthy, digressive rants. But aside from a few bits I reworded, this is an accurate recitation of my views, even beyond the initial shock of it all. And sensitivity edits may or may not change horrific spirit, but they most certainly are a change to content and texture. The entire concept exists only to change content and texture. Editing towards any goal is only done to change content and most certainly texture. That's why you do it. Don't bullshit us about it. And this line, everyone can enjoy the occult medieval madness without feeling excluded or marginalized. It's a phrase so stunningly plastic smile corporate suit, I'm gonna have to make use of it myself sometime just to fuck with people. Anyway. Make the things you want to make the way you want to make them, without regard for the outside world, as best you can. And most importantly, stay fucked, everyone.